Welcome to the Sports Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Luhr, and today we're crossing over to London, UK, to catch up with Michel Masquelier, which everyone here in the industry who's been around the media space specifically would know Michel from his 35 years at IMG. And obviously, this is what we're going to be spending on and digging deep into his incredible career over 3 decades there, with clearly one of the biggest agencies in our industry, and maybe is the biggest now. And all the amazing things, what happened over these 3 decades, the different leaders, of course, who came along, and some of them unfortunately passed away, and Michel had a chance to work with, and of course, the incredible stories around this amazing company does. So welcome to the podcast, Michel.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this here. This is, as I've had a couple of folks in there who had certain periods at IMG, but I've never really had anyone like yourself on it who has been there for such a long period of time. And so learning more about IMG and, of course, hearing some of their stories is going to be quite exciting and interesting for everyone here, I'm sure. Now, as we always do, and, as we kind of start a bit really how the person got into the industry and how it all started. And, of course, we will mention this a few times during the conversation. You've also just in the process of releasing your first book, which is called This Is Not a Dress Rehearsal. And I had the privilege to have a copy and read it. And so, I know a little bit more about it, but love to hear your start coming out of Belgian city and landing in the big UK in London there, and how it all started for you.
Thank you very much, Marcus. Let me just clarify, if you don't mind. I no longer work at IMG, and it has been the case for a number of years now. I mean, correct. I've left probably 5 years ago, but indeed, it's been an incredible journey. Incredible on many fronts, because I was not destined to this. I certainly didn't think I was destined for it. I was a law student at the University of Louvain-la-Neuve in Belgium. Mm-hmm. And I was involved in so many activities, ranging from, participating in the life of the student union. We had our own bar. I was organizing public speaking competitions, sports event, you name it. Right. Without realizing, probably I was a promoter already at the time, but I was a student and making the most of every day. Right. Then ultimately, when I got my diploma, I just say, well, I'm too much of an adventurer or a rebel. And I couldn't see myself spending too much time sorting out legal cases. With all respect to the profession, it didn't fit me. Mm. And I said, okay, now I'm going to live the dreams. I'm going to, pack my car. I had very little money. And then I went to, what I thought was going to be the promised land, potentially. Couldn't speak English. Went, across the channel from Zeebridge to London, or to Dover, then to London. And that was it. I mean, I had no friends, no contact, very little money. An old battered car, and that was the start of my professional life, so to speak. Yeah, and this moment, as if it was yesterday, that was 35 years ago, but I wish I could live it again, if anything. Yeah. So I said, well, what can I do? And then I went to an English school, and bored to death after 2 weeks. I've offered my services for free in a law firm. The guy liked me very much. They said, yeah, sure. You can hang around in the office and see if you can be helpful. And while doing that, I was looking into files, and I find out that IMG was a client of the law firm. It was called Nebro Nathanson Solicitor at the time. Mm. I said, oh my, just reading this fascinating book about Mark McCormack, all what they don't teach you at Harvard Business School, yes. Which by the way is still selling these days, and that was the time of the release. And suddenly I just felt like there was some form of Eureka moment for me. I just say, well, I think this is for me. And I remember my student years, and I was some sort of a promoter, an organizer, some form of leader. And I said, well, if I could end up in this company, I'll find a job which would suit me perfectly well. And that was exactly what's happened. So I asked Nebro Nathanson if they wouldn't mind, sponsor me or recommend me to IMG in London, and my CV landed it on the desk of the guy at the time, Ian Todd, who became my boss and my friend for the next 30 years. And then I went for an interview, and that was the beginning.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I remember in the book, of course, you go in much more detail of that channel crossing and staying in a little cheap sort of house there and all this stuff. So, anyone who, will read it will see more of the background of that. But so now we are at IMG. And just to give the frame here, I think we're talking 1985, right? Just to give a sense of the year we're in here when you joined them. Is that correct, right?
It's correct. 1985 was the year that the fax machine came up in the market, and was a revolution compared to the telex. No mobile phone, just to put.
Yeah, it's a long time ago. Now let's and with I always like to kind of break these things into little chunks here, and so let's talk a bit about that first decade, right? The first 10 years in the company, 85 to let's say 95, around that time. You were at the whole time in the London office, or where was sort of your first sort of 10 years with the company?
No, I mean, first of all, the first job I got, I had to find a point of entry, and I refer always to what's your X factor. My point of entry is, okay, well, I was a lawyer, may as well. Right. I spent 7 years battling to get that piece of paper, I may as well use it. So I said, listen, I mean, I'm a lawyer, and I've got some contacts and friends in Belgium, and I know very well, Stella Artois or Donné at the time, leading racket manufacturer, and Côte d'Or and Godiva chocolates or whatever. I mean, I knew the brand. I didn't know anybody, but I like I say, give me a chance. Yeah. And then the best tool to kind of break the lock and get into the company, I said, listen, why don't we agree, if it's okay with you, that I will offer my services for free. And when I start making money for you, you guys pay me what you think is fair. And that was the spirit of the beginning of the journey. And that's why I'm saying this, is because it's pretty important. When you have an objective, and when you are absolutely determined to reach a goal or a stage in life, you really have to go for it. And that was for me when I just say, well, that's it. It's my job. This is the company I want. It suits me like a glove. I really want to go for it now. I need to show my determination, and where there is a will, there is a way. And that was it.
I love that. And I think, internships are great ways to get in the industry. I've had many of the other guests, who started similarly. And now, again, but let me just stick for a minute here, and the mindset you had, because being an intern and not getting paid means you got to feed yourself in some other ways. So how or how long did it take you before they finally said, okay, fine, here is a little paycheck? I mean, just give us a sense there.
Right. Well, I was not totally broke, in all fairness. I had a bit of money coming in, but not much. And I remember my rent was 51 pounds. To be in with other people, and basically that was my exposure before starting the day. Yeah. £1 a week. So that was that's where I started it, and I had to find weekend jobs, and I was kind of doing little odd jobs here and there, and read the book. You'll find the story. I want to try to stick to your question. So I basically got the opportunity to prove myself. Originally, I worked in the legal department, and that was perfect because I was reading contract after contract. That was a learning path. Yeah. But, speaking hardly in English, you can imagine how useless I was. Not only useless, but I was totally counterproductive for the guy I was working for. Right. He ended up some sort of a nervous breakdown, but there was a good connection with the people I was with, and from the post room to the guy of the first floor, there was and the office of IMG was not big, it was still very much like a family atmosphere, and right. I was making myself helpful here and there, and then suddenly I got the opportunity to to sell or to help in certain contract. And one contract was there with their Procter & Gamble, and it was in Brussels. So I said, I know the people in Brussels. I can help you to implement that campaign. So something like probably 2 to 3 months, 2 months after I started, I got my first pay, and that was just enough to cover my expenses. And the feeling of achievement when you get your first pay is just like, oh my gosh, there's nothing better than that. Yeah. And that's the big of what became the journey from intern to chairman.
Yeah, exactly, which is amazing. So we'll uncover some of that here in the next hour as we go through this. So now we're in the first few months of your internship. You sort of, finding your way through it, making yourself helpful wherever you can, right? And I guess using your relationship into Belgium, into other countries where your language skills are better than your English. That's how it sounds like, right? So, where did that take you then? I mean, if you sort of look at then the first few years, where would you say, you finally had a proper business card and you were, you felt you were really part of the company? What was the sort of the first project or things you were doing?
Business card was written corporate consulting, and I was helping companies. I mean, what I would think you would call that today sponsorship activation, one way or another. Mm-hmm. And so we were advising brand and how to be present in the world of sport in a very proactive way. So how you activate presence. And the first big account I had, which got me to go and spend a year in Paris, was Yves Saint Laurent, and there was a brand called Kouros. Mm-hmm. And Kouros, Yves Saint Laurent, they wanted to develop this very strong image, and we came up with the concept of bringing Kouros to sponsor Mercedes in endurance racing, starting with 24 hours. And it was pretty gutsy because Mercedes, pulled out after this dreadful accident in Le Mans, killing many people. But that was the first time they were going to consider to come back. And we brokered that deal, bringing a sponsorship. But most importantly, we've built an entire communication campaign around endurance racing, going from one 24 hours event to the other one, and doing a big party where Yves Saint Laurent was inviting like 200, 300 guests for the 24 hours. We were renting 2 trains in the station in Le Mans, like the Orient Express train we turned them into a hotel. There was also bar and restaurants and commuting, Yves Saint Laurent jet set profile type of people into the dirt trucks or the noisy 24 hours race environment. That was really fun. And so I did a bit less than a year. And when it was over, I felt like I wanted to be more like commercial and more proactive. There's nothing wrong with the consulting division, but I felt like if I was going to get involved in sale, I'll be more of a contributor and I'll be rewarded accordingly. And this is when I switched. I would, it's I can't remember the years exactly, but it was in the region of 1990 or 1989, something along those dates.
Right. And so what was the first part you were selling? You were on the sponsorship side of sales?
So Intern was, former Olympian ski racer, brilliant lawyer, a guy with this kind of enormous charisma. Mm-hmm. He was the right-hand man of Mark McCormack, and he started the business in London. And he was effectively kind of surrounding himself in the true spirit of IMG and Mark McCormack at the time by a number of people who could be very helpful in having this very proactive approach, thinking like, that business existed as always. But no, everything was very much of a pioneering spirit. Right. I went from athlete management to events, and much later on into the business of media. But, managing athlete, which was McCormack start, went into events. So we had a number of events which were organized in Europe. And Ian needed people to sell those events. So right. I just say, I'm of language. And there was 6 or 7 people, which created the European sales group. And here I was just basically with whatever you have, a telephone line, or when you're in an airport,
Give me a proposal, give me the yellow pages, and I'm off. Yeah, that's how it started. I know. I remember. I think I used Yellow Pages still when I started selling, which was a little later than you did. But yeah, that's how we did it at those days.
Selling sponsorship for anything, anyway. I mean, just which company do you know? Who's the head of marketing? Yeah, and sell whatever you could sell, and that was really, really good fun.
Yeah. So just give us a bit of a frame here. What type of events was IMG heavily involved? Was it golf? Was it tennis? What was sort of your flagship kind of projects at that time?
Yeah, well, IMG has always been market leader in golf and tennis, where McCormack started was the client reputation. Right. It morphed into event in the same space, but it was anything. I mean, we could go to any promoter, any organization, and say who we are. Everybody knew about McCormack and IMG, and say, well, we're going to sell, for a cut, for a commission. And
all right. So you were not just doing your own events, but you were also selling on behalf of others. Got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So maybe just give me an example of one of the big ones you remember, and you did a nice deal with, or maybe your first big deal which you remember.
Well, there was a very small deal, I have to say, especially when my playing field was Benelux. Yeah. But we had a few international companies based there, or some international brand, and Stella Artois, we did a few deals, and DHL International was based there, so I make some deal with DHL, and I found a way where DHL was going to sponsor Jim Courier, and when Jim Courier became number one, I thought it was a good idea to go to DHL and say, well, you're number one courier company, and Jim Courier is number one. Would it be a great fit? And they say yes, but we're not a courier company. Says the guy, say, well, fine, doesn't matter. That's that sort of things. I remember we went to Munich. There was the big tennis masters cup at the time, the equivalent of the series finals, and then. Teriak was in charge of young Teriak, and he said, okay, well, shall we get our efforts together? And we were a group of 5 or 6 people. We went out there and we were trying to sell anything we could, from hospitality to sponsorship, anything.
I love it. Now, you said you were in charge of Benelux, but you were based still out of the London office, or where were you at that time?
So I was based in London office to start with. Then I had another Eureka moment, and that was a very big one, because Jean-Claude Killy, who was a client of IMG, Jean-Claude Killy became the president of the Winter Olympic Games, the COJO, right? Albertville, 1992. And Jean-Claude Colli entered and said, listen, I mean, I've got this position, and he was co-president with Michel Barnier, that we all know now what he became. But at the time, he was a politician, and he was a politician for the region, and he was a co-president for the Winter Olympic Games. So we put another squad of mercenaries, put it this way. And again, speaking French was a great asset. So I was sent to Paris, and I lived there again for a year and a half. And we did something quite exceptional, I believe, in collaboration with the local team. We've raised more money for the Winter Olympic Games in France than for the Summer Olympic Games in Los Angeles before that. If we that club, we're talking about seriously big numbers, and all the top companies in France. So it was, for me, so suddenly you move from a sales guy who sell anything to suddenly, the guy we're going to speak head-to-head to the top guys like Crédit Lyonnais and Renault and whoever, right. and talk about serious business and serious communication program for the world's biggest stage, which are the Olympics. Absolutely. And that was me a change emotionally, mentally, intellectually, and I kind of felt, oh my gosh, I mean, now I'm in the groove. That is something which is special, and I still remember now, a big moment in your career. That was it.
And I love it. Now, a question here on, you are a lawyer by training. That doesn't make you a salesperson right away, right? But clearly, it sounds like you had a little bit of a knack for that. You were a natural born salesperson. How did you kind of fall into it? You felt it was just a natural thing for you, or it took a while to learn the tricks?
It's a very good question. Still today, I'm kind of asking myself the question, and I've interviewed many people. I mean, in many different parts of the world when we're building the team, and I was always try to find what sort of animal I have in front of me, and I ask the same question to myself. And who are you? Are you a fish? Are you a bird? Are you an operator? Are you a negotiator? Sales guy? Are you somebody who's going to be more like in the servicing industry? Are you a risk taker? Are you a rebel? Finding your identity is pretty important, especially when you need to pitch it to others and get an outcome. So I'm a lawyer I would not say by mistake, but because I wasn't sure. I mean, I didn't like school, and when you don't like things like education, then you're bad, like anything. If you're not passionate, you're bad. Simple as that. On the other hand, I was kind of popular in a number of areas. I was very social, and I was entrepreneurial. And then I kind of felt like, trading content. I was making pocket money selling cigarettes when I was in my early years of college, or things like that. So I think in my DNA, I was more of a salesman than a lawyer, but being a lawyer gave me a respectable face. And I've kind of, that's who I am. That's the sort of person, sales guy. I have no shame about saying that. But when you have the chance to work in an organization such as IMG or any of the agencies, if you don't have the heart of a sales guy, I don't think you can succeed.
Right. Yeah, and I totally agree. And I've had many other guests on the call who, like I said, many of them had a background in legal, right? So it definitely seems to be there's a trend in the industry, and of course some of the founding fathers had legal backgrounds as well, etc. Right? So there's obviously there's something about it which is interesting, and obviously you're another great example of it. Now let's talk a bit about, obviously, the man you were working for at that time, Mr. Mark McCormack, very much alive and kicking and in charge of the organization. When was sort of the first time you met him or had that the first interaction with him? And tell us a bit about that.
Well, it was very peculiar because, of course, the guy had an aura. And he was kind of constantly on the road, and he's going from Wimbledon to the Open Championship, and he's going from one event to another. And in between, he goes to all his offices around the world. He get his close executive around him, and they, set up the strategy and the war plan. And this is what we're going to do. And talking about an inspiration innovator. I mean, that guy was, still now, the way how he was communicating with executives and the way he would project his vision of the future is equal to none. I've never seen somebody with so much like a vision. And I was in the fray, but honestly, very far behind. Okay, so and the meeting was finished while I was kind of walking into the room, put it this way. But one year I wanted to go to Wimbledon, and then I said, "Oh, can I get tickets?" and so on and so on. And I happened to bump into him, and I introduced myself. I mean, I just and I said, "So my name is Michel Masquelier," and so on and so forth. And since I heard about you. I say, "My gosh, what's happened? I must have done a good deal or something like that." "No, so you're the guy who goes and play golf in the before coming to the office." I said, "OMG, if you need an element of X factor, that was a pretty big one." So what's happened is that, and I open the bracket, stop me whenever you get bored of it, but I like to play golf, but I had no money. So what I did was kind of waking up at 5:30 in the morning, and I went to Wentworth Golf Club. And at the time, no membership. But I was there before the gardener, so I kind of opened there. I played 12 holes before coming to the office, coming back to the office, tell the story to all my friends and say, "You're crazy. It's illegal. You can't do that." I said, "Well, I'm going to do it until somebody stops me." And I arrive at 9 o'clock in the office, having played 12 holes. So that was a little bit of an aura. And somebody repeated that to McCormack. And I said, "Oh, you're that guy." So that's how I had my, and then surprise, but I was invited to the next meeting. And then in that meeting, again, you follow your heart. And if you're not scared of making yourself ridiculous, then you try to intervene, come up with ideas and suggestions. And and start building a reputation.
Absolutely. No, I love that. I mean, again, if we jump a bit later into your career there and staying a bit on Mark here for a minute, what was the sort of, where, you referred to it earlier already, saying, you had this amazing vision, and his leadership style, right? Innovative, etc. What would have been an example which you saw where that would really, you can use here?
Let me rewind just a little bit so we finish the first decade, because this is when things started going different. So while kind of in my Kojo experience, the Winter Olympic Games, that was leading up to 1992, which at the time was a big deal. Brussels was going to be capital of Europe. And I went to Mark and Ian and said, I think we need an office in Brussels. I mean, there's no representation. Say, yeah, good idea. Perfect. We have to.
Right.
So was two people, really. I mean, maybe three. And then so then I started establish myself, and I then kind of joined a European sales group, but in a more structured way after my my Paris escapade for the Olympic Games, and I started to organize events. There was the Donné Indoor Championship. I had 14 of the top 15 best player in the world. We organized the open golf. I thought it was a good idea to maybe try to organize some classical music event. We had opera singers, and I was the promoters of that sort of things. And effectively, the beauty is that as long as you make money, go for it. And I was getting quite excited to do that, and I've done that for a year or two, maybe three, and then I had this kind of search for my soul moment, and I say, it's great, it's all fine. I've done that for nearly 10 years now, and I need to reinvent myself. And again, I went to my boss at the time and I said, I'm really sorry, I don't want to let you down, but I just feel like I need to do something different with my life, and then I'm gonna resign. I say, really? What? So you say, what are you gonna do? I say, I just feel I'd like to start east and coming back west. I want to do a round the world tour. I've got a bit of money in my pocket now. I'm going to backpack around the world and live all sorts of experience. And I was, very deep into analyzing and understanding other religion, try to create my own one. And then the end said, well, I kind of envy you, but good luck. If you come back in 6 months, we take you back. And if it's more than that, good luck with whatever you want to do with your life. Right. And I came back 6 months later, and I grew my hair, and I spent a lot of time in the South Pacific. You can imagine the look I had when I came back. And I arrived in the New York office, actually, of IMG, and I was at the time of the US Open. And I'll never forget, I pushed the door, and I have the look of Björn Borg. And then there's some people just come next to me, they help me with my luggage, they sit here, they want a drink, what can we do for you? And so, oh my goodness, so happy to see me back. The prodigal boy kid is coming back to IMG, taking me for a tennis player, but whatever. that was the comeback, and I was kind of I would say the end of my first decade, and then my second decade. And I'm sorry, I've done a bit of a detour to your question. Is I got involved in media. And media was to me, the right time, being at the right place at the right time and creating your own luck and opportunities definitely was for me to get into that groove. Right. It's like Gary Player to say, the harder you practice, the luckier you get. But I've been very lucky all the way. But that was definitely a lucky moment. That was the moment where technology was morphing from, free to air to pay TV, and opening the floodgate of more content for television. And, I was a sales guy, and that was it. So I started basically selling instead of sponsorship. I was the sales representative for a number of markets and getting involved in all sorts of pioneering projects. There was a great opportunity. Murdoch was opening a channel in China. And I was sent on a mission, another pioneering mission. And I went to Beijing and to Hong Kong first and Beijing after to try to broker a deal and go to the CFA, the Chinese Football Association. There were 2 matches on, two matches on CCTV, and we were proposing to produce an extra 2 matches, and I would have the right to set it to pay TV at the time. I mean, talking about pioneering work, we had to produce 2 football matches at the time. Some of them were, on the edge of the Gobi Desert, and then you need to be the week after, 10,000 kilometers further. Whatever it was, it was kind of an incredible journey. But all these stories, one put next to the other, suddenly, it kind of build yourself up as an innovator, as an entrepreneur, as a great executive at the same time, with inspiring his colleagues and so on. So I have been given the opportunity after landing these kind of success stories to run the sales force in Europe, and it's been probably the beginning of my most pleasurable journey. Because I'm very social, and I'm I would say a respected person in an environment of leadership. But suddenly to be given the responsibility of other people's life and career, and how to generate the extra value by being a manager, then suddenly you raise the stake, and it's a different job, and with a lot of responsibility. And that was really when I started to build a team. And for me, sorry, it took me 10 minutes to start answering your question, but what about leadership? To me, being a leader is you need to be inspirational. And in very simple terms, if you ask me the 2 basic components of being inspirational, I would use the 2 qualifications like, it's the 2 elements, love and respect. Why love? Because you have to encourage people to go the extra mile. In our industry, and you know that better than I do, you can only get into the good margin when people go the extra miles and deliver the more than what is expected. Yes. The support of the team and how you build enthusiasm and confidence around you is absolutely key to get to that. Okay, I had this deal with my executives, friends, colleagues, just to say, guys, if there is success, is yours, and if there is failure, it's mine. But don't let me down. So that was the spirit. So you give the opportunity, you give the chance to your people, to your friend. It's just like there's no glass ceiling. We're gonna build something as if it was our organization, but the good news is that somebody else is paying for it. So, we're going to take some risk, and then sky is the limit. Yep. So you protect, you empower. I was kind of morphing into some sort of not like a CEO, but more like a chief empathy of it, and being very, very loving and caring for the people around me, creating a team, creating a spirit, creating some sort of family. The second component, which is equally important, is the respect side of it. There were rules. We look like a bunch of pioneers or mercenaries, but there were rules. The number one is you work hard, you play hard, but you have to work hard. And the goodwill is not enough. We have to produce results. If there is no result, then there's no business. We win together or we fail together. We will share the produce of success. And to me, that was the biggest challenge I've had, because I was a little bit of rebellious within IMG by creating this IMG media distribution, and I went to my boss at the time. I will come to that probably later on, but suddenly, the leader was a venture capitalist, and I said, well, you can't work in a venture capitalist environment of private equity and ask your salesmen to over-deliver and not to compensate them accordingly. So we're going to create a bonus structure, which we did, and that's being all put together. You have love and respect, 1 + 1 = 4, easily. And that very efficient formula is certainly delivered outstanding result. And I'm very proud of this. So I went from being the head of sales Europe to head of sales worldwide, and from then president of IMG Media. But that was really the beginning.
Yeah, amazing. And again, I want to, before we definitely want to obviously touch on when Forstmann came involved in the company. But we stick for a minute. So while Mark was still around, one thing I've always heard over the years was that obviously his level of risk taking and setting up new events and then building them up and accepting the fact that new events could lose some money for a couple of years, and then with a lot of hard work you would turn them around. Is that what you saw as well? That as an entrepreneur, Mark McCormack clearly was a true risk taker, in a calculated way, and maybe to some degree that also was one reason maybe IMG wasn't maybe as profitable as it could be, because he just kept growing and taking more risk. Would you describe that as well from an insider?
I would take a different angle. I would say like he was he was a spirit of visionary and innovation. Okay, so he could see way ahead of anybody else where the next revenue stream will come in, and his sense of anticipation was absolutely fantastic. Yes, you may say, okay, well, now we're going to create European tour production, right? So that was a joint venture between the European tour and IMG, and Intern was the guy who did again that amazing contract which lasts for decades. But that was the vision of, okay, well, there's a number of events which are not making money. We're gonna help with financing that. We're also gonna put a media infrastructure of production. So there's another investment to be done in here. But we're gonna make out of golf a live product 4 days a week, which is going to go around the world and create basically a media product out of something which was not a media product.
Right.
And then sponsorship sale came into that, production, television license fee. Originally, the license fee were not big enough to cover the production cost. Yes, there was a risk, but the vision was the one that I just described. Like you create product for the future, and he never stopped doing that. Right. He was not a gambler. It was not. I mean, I've worked for Ted Forstmann. He was a gambler. Ari Emanuel is just like is a very different sort of manager, entrepreneurs pushing you to take risks because there's a big pictures that we want to capture. But Mark was much more steady and control. But his ability to forecast the future was equal to none. And it's still inspiring me today to some of the advice that he's given us. I can give you two very small little examples. And I was really towards the area when a bit before he passed away. We were in Bay Hill, the Arnold Palmer Golf Club, and it was late in the evening. And then he got the media executive around the table and said, okay, guys, I want to hear more stories, more news, more project. Where do you see this and that? Don't tell me we're going to do more of that. I'd like to see something different. Everybody had their own concept and idea, and then he started pitching some of his ideas. And it was late, and we were tired and bored, and they just said we were kind of being polite. They said, well, here's the first idea. So we're going to put 10 people in the room, and they're going to be given food ingredient, all exactly the same thing. They're going to cook a meal, and then there will be a jury to decide what is the best meal being cooked. And then we look at each other and say, oh my gosh, the guy is really losing it now. Then I've got another idea. We're going to do dance, and we're going to turn into dance sports, and we're going to put all the glitz, and there's going to be an entertainment product. And I say, oh my gosh, okay. We were very polite, but basically we turned the guy down when he came up with the two biggest, format of Strictly Come Dancing and Bake Off. The same now, back to back. I said, no, it's never going to work.
These are great examples, and I obviously they're in your book as well. And so I remember reading about it, and I love it. I think it's incredible. I've never really met him, unfortunately, but I did read his book as well, and it was amazingly inspiring. Now, again, to sort of transition into then the period when Ted Forstmann then took over, Mark passing away, of course, came somewhat subtle, right? It wasn't sort of something anyone maybe saw coming. What happened in the organization? I mean, was there just a complete shock, or everyone knew what to do and therefore you just kind of moved on? I mean, what was the feeling at that, whatever period of time?
Well, shock is the right word. There was also a certain element of perhaps worries from the perspective that, this sort of business, you're highly leveraged, and all the lenders, the bankers kind of saying, well, without the captain on board, that ship is going to sink. And that was really like there was some very airy moment where, you have, I don't know how many employees around the world, and it's payday, and the cash needs to come out of the reserve, and I was in that group, honestly, I was driving IMG Media, and that was the cash cow of the business, and we're getting the kick out of that, and we were not too concerned about that. We were very confident that our business was solid and growing, but that was the moment where venture capitalists came in, and Ted Forstmann, which is another pioneer. If Mark was a pioneer in sports management in the servicing industry, Ted was a pioneer in the VC area.
Right.
And he came in and he wrote basically a check for, I think it's $750 million, something like that, maybe 850. I can't remember.
Right.
And basically all outbidding everyone. He just came in and said, boom, that's it. I'm buying the business. He knew Mark and the family and so on. And then he overpaid, and everybody thought that's crazy. He's overpaid. The company is like, and suddenly you move from being a business of servicing athletes, servicing governing body, servicing, a number of entities into, okay, now we're in the spirit of ownership. So what is it that we own? Mm-hmm. Client management, don't own anything. Event, yeah, we own a few events. Where else can we invest? What can we buy? Let's be more ambitious. And that's where Ted came into the picture, with a certain degree and element of, I would not say naivety, but I was not far from that, because the understanding of the word sport, there's very few properties that you can really buy out. You're not
absolutely. Yeah. You're always renting a piece, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of a bit of a wake-up call in that process, but, there was cash. He's asked all the executive who wanted to, and that was my chance for me to move from somebody who was earning a salary into somebody who had stake in the business, and then through a combination of buying stock and getting option, I was suddenly an owner, vertical comma, very small one, but an owner, right. And that helped me to kind of change my philosophy. And I was at the time when I moved from head of sales worldwide to president of IMG, but I had my serious fallout with Ted. Right. Effectively, he wanted to replace me. He said, well, maybe you've been in the business for too long. I said, no, Ted, you paying me to tell you what I think, and I'm telling you exactly what I think. That system is not going to work. This is what you should be doing. And then I was kind of writing my strategic plan when the guy feeling was like, you guys are all chasing small little rabbits. I'm going to teach you on how to shoot elephant. But, there was not many elephant to kill. We were genuinely, I think, pretty good in what we were doing. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to make changes that we couldn't do. So I was clashing. And I virtually walked out of the company, being half resigning, half pushed out. Mm. And then I did some sort of a comeback, and he said, Michel, I kind of respect you because you're telling me things that nobody else wanted to tell me before. And I think you have a point. So what do we suggest? And then we've rebuilt what I thought was going to be the war machine of brokering the business of media and creating a portfolio which ended up having over 200 different clients or governing body or clubs and so on. We built 20,000 hours of live content. We were segmenting the rights from live to news to closed circuit television to everything that now today. That was before the digital age to the way how we understand it today. Yep. And year after year, we were exploding the projections. And from being a zero in his eyes, I became like a hero, and I became very close to him until he passed away. But he promoted me, I can't remember the year, but it's going to come back to me in a minute. He promoted me to, I think it's in the year 2000, whatever, close to 2010. president of IMG Media, which implied two roles: head of production. I've never produced anything in my life, and then head of sales, and I was comfortable in that. But I was kind of merging the two together, and I did that probably 5 years, and then an absolute bore.
Right. Now, interesting. And, again, obviously a little bit, about TSA. We've always been a little mini version of some of the stuff you just talked about, right? We've always were in the TV distribution, and we were competing against IMG at times. Sometimes we won, and most of the times we lost. We've had sponsorship as well, which for us was the other way around, right? Because we had these media relationships, and we always looked at what other revenue streams we could find for people in Asia. And so it was just, and then events came on the back of it. So all the things you just touched on, maybe just in a different order. But there is a big difference selling media and selling sponsorship, right? I would always say media is somewhat easier, but you have to have the ammunition, right? You need to have that relationship and those clients. And we all remember there initially, in the early days, we were still working on commissions, right? And so there isn't as much risk capital in it, but these checks got larger and larger, right? You were competing head on, and this is sort of where one of the examples, we lost the US Open Tennis and BWF to IMG being outbidded by the end of it, where we just couldn't compete with the numbers anymore and the risk that reflect that. Now that was already during Ted's era that you guys were aggressively out there acquiring more content and really, competing, of course, against other bigger agencies and the little guys like us. How would he look at this? I mean, what was it really? Is it, we just balance the portfolio, and as long as you have a big enough margin in some of them, you can take some lost leaders with others, or what was sort of the philosophy there?
No, what is exactly the right timing and the example you're taking. I mean, as much as he was an ambitious and audacious financier, there was something for him which I think to his dying days he never really got, is the concept of a financial guarantees and the risk associated to that. And I had a lot of fallout, because I said, okay, now we're going to bid $100 million, and I believe there's $125 million out there, and we're going to take a 10% commission, so we're going to take the next $10 million. If we do a 3-year contract, this is the projections, and here is all the column B. Yeah. And I said, Michel, I'm not going to risk $100 million. I said, Ted, you're not risking $100 million. It's out there. I know. I mean, this is why we've opened 30 offices around the world, and we had a sales team, with all due respect to your organization or the other, we just wanted to be ahead of the game, not specifically with the nature of the size of the check that we had to write, but we were pitching to the governing bodies something which I believe was very unique. It was a structure based on 3 pillars. The first one, like we had, sales guy in every part of the world. We didn't need to go to Sportel to kind of sell. Yeah. We have Sportel for other reasons, and then so we had market intelligence equal to none, and sales guy who knew exactly the value of things. Then we also had the second pillar is like when we had a golf division, a tennis division, a motor racing division, a football division, and those guys, they knew before anybody else if there was going to be an up-and-coming ladies tennis players, which are going to trigger, increase their
rights. Yeah,
and that was pretty important. It's not generous. You really need to be a specialist in the sophistication of the business of sport, the way how we know it now, especially. Yeah. And then the third, it's just like, okay, well, what about the right segment? Technology is kind of never-ending, creating new business opportunities. And all these rights segment and all these carve-out is the way that when we go to a governing body, we sell the 3. And we say, like, guys, there will be no stone unturned. We will be the one who can anticipate the future and where the money is going to come from area where you don't even contemplate.
You don't even know yet. You're correct.
Yet anticipate. So with these 3 and a check, guys. So that's how we were winning. Yeah. That was really the way how we were positioning ourselves. Now, writing the check, it was my most frustrating moment systematically. And I said to Ted and all the army of financiers are telling him, "Oh, IMG Media, they're really good, but it's very risky, etc." I remember vividly, probably one of the worst moments in my career. We had the market intelligence and the way on how to buy, either buy out or minimum guarantee, the World Cup for Europe. And the nature of the check was in the region of $800 million. At the time, now we're going to laugh about it, but, and then Ted said to me, he says, I'm not going to give $800 million to buy one property when I paid $750 million to buy the company.
Yeah.
That's not buying. You're not buying the World Cup. You are offering a financial guarantee, and I know there is $1 million out there. I can guarantee you, I lose my job. It's just, you kind of look at me and say, I don't care if you lose your job. I don't want to lose my company. If there is no World Cup, then what? They say, but during the war there was a World Cup. So I've never managed to convince the owners or the financiers around the company that we really knew what we were doing.
Interesting.
And business of financial guarantee was the name of the game. Now,
yeah, absolutely.
And to the reality, the more successful you are, the more you educate your clients. The more you educate the client, the more they can do the things by themselves, or the more aggressive they are to raise the minimum guarantee and to reduce your profit margin. So what sounds like a good deal, after 2 or 3 renewals, maybe it's not a good deal, and the best deal is the one that you don't do, and then let other people to do. And I like to think that we were market leaders, and we've always been, and my successors and still are. But the people who were very, very challenging are the ones who just misjudged that. They've put too much of a guarantee, and then too little of a margin, and by misjudgment or bad luck or combination,
that's where you get it wrong. Yeah, absolutely.
When belly up.
Yeah, and exactly. I mean, we both know the media game there is an arbitrage game, right? It's always about what the rights are now, what they're currently worth, right? And that in some cases with enough salespeople around and they talking to the market, you will get a pretty good sense, right? So if whether it's 10 million guarantee or 100 million, doesn't matter. It's the same calculation always, right? How much is it now already? Which means if you do nothing else, you should theoretically get that same amount in, right? That's your risk factor right from the get-go, right? So let's say it's 9 million now and you're offering 10 on the assumption that you can obviously grow the value with new deals or renewals, etc., right? So that is, and we've had the same conversation, probably obviously on a smaller level, but, with my board over the years, these debates that we're not risking that 10 or that 1 million, whatever it is you're risking the gap in between, right? Whatever it is, you may be getting it wrong, right? And a company like IMG, of course, can risk larger sums there. So that's sort of, at least my board, at least at the end of the day, they got their head around it, right? They weren't risking 800 million. If the previous sales of the for Europe for FIFA was already 700 million, let's say hypothetically, you're risking 100. If you at least, if you're only getting back what the last guy did, right? And so I think that's an interesting factor. And of course, that world has even more change, right? These guarantees getting bigger and bigger, and of course, therefore the risk goes up, and that's like what we all know. Some agencies got it wrong, and not just even in the current environment, but even in the old days, right? That's how ISL killed itself, right? Guaranteeing this crazy amount of money with the ATP Tour at that time. So, yeah, there's plenty of some of those examples are out there. Now, again, so obviously Ted, led the company, and then again, unfortunately, also died. I think in 2011, and then sort of again a few years later, I guess there was another sales process, and all of a sudden we got WME, IMG, Endeavor here showing up. Now, I believe you were still around during that time as well. So talk us through a bit that whole transition then in that era.
Being at the right place at the right time again. I've been very lucky to be in that situation. Harry, whom I knew, he was already kind of socializing with Ted, and then there was a few deals that they were contemplating doing together and so on. So I had the privilege of knowing each other. And when the company, so when Ted passed away. So, the estate consulting with the relevant firm were in charge of putting the company for sale. So I was part of the roadshow, as you speak. And I remember New York, very intense, week after week, presentation after presentation. And when WME came in, led by Ari, but with the Silver Lake private equity in the back,
right.
There was something very different from the others. And Ari's got this kind of very communicative energy where he would kind of say, okay, we're going to put IMG and we're going to put WME and we're going to create the world's largest sports and entertainment. And that's the vision. Mm-hmm. So the great advantage to work with Ari and Patrick at the time, which became Endeavor, was that the leader was a guy from the servicing industry. He was an agent. He was a super agent, and he understood the business of agency, yep. But he kind of had the best of both worlds. You had private equity led by an agent, and with ambition and energy equal to none. And effectively, when there has been a takeover, while it was difficult to manage the expectation of a new buyer when you move from a McCormack pioneer to a Forstmann pioneer, okay, Ari, there was no transition from understanding the business model. He was there, and he was already on the next stage on how to grow the company and how to create more acquisition and how to integrate. My advantage again was that I was number one. Well, IMG Media was number one in the market, and a journey of delivering more every single year. So that looked very good in the books. So we were popular, and I've kind of organized with Ari to say, okay, well, this is my vision. This is what we're going to do. This is how we should merge various divisions within the company, and so on and so forth. And I had already kind of anticipate somehow that, in order to grow, you need to delegate. And for me, that has always been my motto. And when I said, earlier on, the arts of leadership, it implied the ability to be trusted and to create this kind of handover process. And there was more and more of my senior management team, which were taking a position. So when Ari came over and he said, okay, now, I'm now the new owner. I say, well, Ari, what do you want to do? Because there is a team in place. Do you want to keep me? Do you want to move on? Do you want to change everything? But that's my vision. That's the way how I see it. I said, no, you help me. And then I've introduced him to all the governing bodies. We're spending time with Wimbledon, explaining, how the Hollywood industry was going to serve. I mean, all this kind of cultivating the dream. But there was a moment for me where, I was kind of feeling like I was 200 days a year on the road. I haven't seen my children growing, and it was exhausting. I mean, I don't think I've ever worked. To me, life from student to IMG, it's always been a lifestyle, and working hard and traveling a lot. It was a lifestyle. I mean, I think it was Mark Twain who said, "Find a job you like, and you will never work again." But that is, to me, that was exhausting. I mean, emotionally, mentally, physically exhausting. And I said, to manage another venture capitalist whom I said, okay, well, are you $100 million profit, EBITDA? Okay, so when are you going to be at 150? Next year, the year after? I say, well, hold on a second, and I was kind of exhausted. Unfortunately, 1 year after they took the takeover, I never forget, we were invited by Ari at the Oscar ceremony in Los Angeles, and just before going, my wife has been diagnosed with cancer, and I was there, and I was just kind of all over the place. So was she, and I said to Ari, I'm really sorry, but this is happening, and but don't worry, there is a whole team out there. I said, Michel, you stay at home, don't you worry. And his brother was an very important, well-known oncologist. He got me in touch with his brother. With a golden heart, he just helped me to face the new challenge in life. And somehow, for me, it was like the beginning of my retirement. I still did another 4 or 5 years, but I went from president of IMG Media, handing out the business to somebody who was much more capable than me, Joris Francini, who basically was already, striking big, new money, new deal, new clients, new everything. And I say, I can pull out without leaving any broken glass behind me. And this is what's happened. So I became chairman of event and media for IMG. I was still trying to kind of implement some element of my vision, but it was difficult. But effectively, I started winding down, and I then became some sort of a president, chairman, and consultant, something like that. When you become chairman, that's usually it's bad news. It's like, thank you very much. You're not fired, but we don't need you anymore, or kind of whatever. Not to that extent, but for me, I had another 3 or 4 years of, let's say, non-compete. Put it this way, it was more like a non-compete. But I still enjoyed very much to see, like, all the time, an investment and the business model that we've created, the vision we had, like, it survives you, and it gives me a profound degree of contentment.
Yeah, absolutely. And you should be proud of, as I said, obviously how important roles you've played to create what IMG and the company is still about today. So, it's great stuff here. Now, let's touch on a few more other things here. There's so much more we can talk about. We could do this probably for another hour, but we also, we'd be conscious of time here. Now, obviously, IMG/Endeavor then ended up buying the UFC. Were you a bit involved in that whole process, or not really? That was
already. And then when I said, when Ari got IMG, and then we've merged IMG WME, there was this big conference. We were going in the Los Angeles area and having, the vision of the future, and then we were entertained moment where you have to pinch yourself and say it can't be true. We had Snoop Dogg or Lady Gaga coming in the bar where we were, and they were singing for 200 executives there. I mean, that was and Ari at the time, he was kind of already jumping on the next boat, which is what's next? What's the next acquisition? And obviously the UFC one was something which, I was trying to represent UFC, and then I was very close to signing a representation agreement, and then Forstmann was invited to invest and getting 40% of the UFC at the time. And he said, it's too much. Ari was already involved, and obviously that was on his line of acquisition, line of fire, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, and 2 years later, but I was not involved, no.
Okay. Well, just to give people a sense here, right? So Ari or Ari Emanuel bought IMG for around 2.4 billion. At least that's sort of what's sort of publicly reported out there. With Ted Forstmann had bought it at 750. So there's, there's a good, nice jump there over that period of time. Then you added the UFC for another 4 billion, and then of course there was a sort of first round of an IPO in 2019, which was sort of aborted, and then 2021 into recently there was the listing with a 10 billion valuation. I'm not sure I had enough time to check what the valuation is here at the moment actually, but again, huge jumps, of course, from below $1 billion to a $10 billion company now. If you look at it now, and I know you weren't necessarily involved in all of those things at the later part here, but you've been long enough around and you've seen what happened. I mean, what did you ever? Is it surprise, or you just felt that was a natural progression and the company always had that potential to go there and and potentially go beyond that now?
I don't think anybody could have forecasted that. And then McCormack in his grave must be wondering what the hell is going on. And, he never wanted himself. He's always said that was a family business, and it turned into this, multi-billion-dollar business. But, you're kind of surfing the wave of sports management and media in particular. Yeah. And it's not like an IMG story. Yes, IMG was number one. I mean, IMG created, the industry, or McCormack created the industry to start with, or it was a precursor. Everybody copied. Like you said, everybody wanted to be like a mini IMG or something like that. Yeah. Somebody succeeded not badly. But the whole industry, while you would say like IMG always being the head of the competition, and still today, I would think that's still the number one company. And I promise you, I have got zero vested interest. I haven't kept a single share whatsoever. I still have my heart in the house, or certainly with some of the executive who are there. But I kind of take a distance, and I see this industry of sports and entertainment, because there's very much a blur between the two. Mm-hmm. And I'm not surprised with the number, and I think the numbers will carry on, and you have new players coming in. And whether it's the likes of the Facebook or the Amazon or the Google, etc., they're going to keep pushing those numbers. I mean, if there is one new commodity that which is like, in addition to everything, is the word data. I mean, if media brings data to those companies, and they're going to react one way or another by monetizing live content with fan engagement and data sponsorship activation whatsoever, I don't think there is any reason why, these kind of inflation of values of all the companies and all the players which are involved in this industry, I don't see a bubble bursting at all.
Yeah, I would agree with you, especially, like I said, if you look at the data side of it. The other part, which is always one of my favorite sort of examples to just showcase, I think, the huge opportunities out there. If you take clubs, right, with their huge fan bases around the world, right? Manchester United has, sort of claims to have 1 billion fans around the world. Well, their revenue is not even $1 billion, right? They're at whatever it was, 600-700 million or whatever pounds it is, right? So they don't even make $1 per fan around the world. So if, with these new ways of monetization where, direct to consumer approaches in other ways, why wouldn't a true fan spend $1 with you every month? That's $1 billion a month, not a year. Right? And, that may be too simplistic. And, but I want to use this also for, if you think of it in the larger picture, right? So I think there are major upsides for these large federations or rights holders, which you guys obviously represented over the years, and to, of course, the big clubs, which, these massive fan bases. So I think that we're both probably see that, and in some way or the other, maybe we'll still be involved a bit going forward. What sort of, before we get a bit more back into your book here, and that's a great way to maybe also finish up, what is it what you're doing right now? I think you're doing some consulting work, right? And you're working on a couple of things.
Well, when it was finished, my last day of my consulting and non-compete and everything, and I was invited to do another 4 years, and I said maybe it's the right time. You need to find and feel the moment, and at the same time, touch wood, my wife got all right, and then the treatment went well, and I just kind of felt, okay, now I'm gonna use what is the most valuable commodity in life, which is time. And by definition, the less time you have, the more valuable it becomes.
Yes.
And to use time, and I have a bucket list which gets bigger than smaller. And one of the thing I wanted to do is that I wanted to write a book, and then and it's a story where I speak. It's a series of how can I call it? It's a series of genuine and authentic experiences, and it's an honest account to my not only professional journey, but also my personal journey. And I'm speaking to my children, and I'm giving them advice the way how I would have loved to have advice when I started my career. Right. And I'm not saying like, this is the rule book on how to be successful and content in life. I'm just saying if effing little Belgian come out of nowhere, arrived in London, couldn't say a word of English, had no contact, no relationship whatsoever. And I've managed that journey, which gives me, a kick like there's no description on how much fun it has been all the way. I'm saying you can have your cake and eat it. You can have a successful career without sacrificing your personal journey. You can have a fun journey without sacrificing your career. And this is this sort of blend recipe that I'm trying to reflect, and it's coming out pretty soon. It's coming out in December, and that's a new challenge. And I want to have new challenge. To answer your question, what am I doing? I just want to do interesting things, different things, like I've always done in my life. So during during lockdown, I have a refuge up in the mountain in Switzerland where I live now for the last 12 years. And then I've retired. I was isolating from the lockdown, basically. And I was on my own in my hut, and I wrote and listened to my music that I haven't listened for a long time, open bottle of wine I've been collecting for years, and having really a fantastic time putting all these thoughts and advice together and coming up with philosophical reflections, put it this way. And that's been my main occupation. Parallel to that, I do investments. I also advise some private equity if and when, wherever it makes sense, or governing body, but more like on a personal basis, maybe from me to a president or something like that. This is exchange views, nothing formal at all. It's not really a job. It's more like continuing the social journey of swimming in the waters, which were absolutely, I think you as well, and all the people of our community, we're living in the most exciting environment. When you think about working and what we've done, it's been such a ball, and I don't think I can retire, and I don't think too many people can retire because it's so addictive as a lifestyle.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think when people always say, do what you love or love what you do, it's not difficult in our industry, right? If you can't enjoy that, and if you're not loving the energy which this industry brings, then, you I don't know what will get you excited. And I totally agree. I really enjoyed reading your book, and the stories, of course. And like you said, it's a nice mixture of anecdotal stories, of course, from the industry, mixed in with your own perspectives and your own learnings, right? And I can see that what you just said earlier, that it's written sort of, that you would pass it to your kids or someone, a younger generation, to go, well, here's stuff I've learned. You don't need to learn it on your own. You can just, get a head start with the stuff. And that was good. It was good, and enjoyed the read there. Yeah, I'm sure, being nervous to get it out there, and I'm sure, as I said, hopefully the podcast will help for some people to come across it and and buy it. Now, the part which also I thought was really interesting reading your book, is the parallels between the two of us. We're both from, we're not both not English speakers by birth, being from Germany, and you're from Belgium, so we both had our little, I guess, challenges, I think, when we both started getting into English speaking countries and working there and operating there. This whole concept of leaving our homes, in the sort of good middle class European households there, and out there and trying to run around the world. You in the UK, I started in the US, and then landed, of course, here in Asia. The whole thing about, I think we both have a good comparative spirit, at least that comes across in the book as well. And of course, a huge passion for the things we do, the hunger to learn. And this whole concept also, I think you talk about it in your book as well, this sort of what you call being a possibilist, right? Seeing, I guess, the glass half it full rather than half empty, sort of, there's so much parallels. I constantly was thinking, wow, it's funny how similar we are, even though we didn't really know each other that well, right? I think we obviously must have bumped into each other at the usual sportels, or maybe standing next to each other at a bar in Monaco and having a drink. But we were clearly not doing business together, and maybe competing against each other in some sense. But there is so much parallels, which I love. The networking which you enjoy. And even we both created some bike races out of respective universities. It's just hilarious how much similarities there is. So I really enjoyed that.
Community we were saying earlier on, this is very incestuous, and you think it's big, but at the end of the day, you better not fall out with too many people, because you can see those people. One day they're competitors, the other day is going to be a partner, or is going to be the master, the person you're going to be working with or for. And I think, like, the approach, you're saying that, we were probably mixing in the same bars. It's more than probably, it's for sure. Yeah, I hope you came to our parties at Sportel, by the way. So we did a lot of business in an environment which was unusual, like, going to an office. I said to the sales guys, go out there, use your travel and entertainment business to make friends, to go and see the world, to create new relationships, to seek for new opportunities. And back to your point and to my point, is just like, when you have a limited amount of time on the planet, and then you can, I quote Bob Marley, like, live the life you love and love the life you live. When you have this opportunity of being in an environment where we are, there's no war, there's no hunger, everything, all the indicators are quite positive on many economic fronts. And in addition to that, we have happy families, and we have the best job in the world. I mean, for God's sake, why don't we want to do something about it? I mean, let's just like make the most of it. Just go and push your own boundaries, and that's really what drives me. Yes, indeed, you mentioned the element of passion, but everything which goes with the passion, thinking with your emotion, with your heart, and being aware that things can collapse tomorrow. I've had my son who had a very bad accident when he was 4.5 years old. He was virtually dying in my arms, and he was resuscitated in the ambulance. The blood was gushing from everywhere. And so my life could have been finished from one minute to another. And I'm sure people are going to listen to you say they didn't have a happy ending in that context. But you need to live like tomorrow could be over. And this carpe diem philosophy, the seize the day philosophy, is really, to me, what has driven. And I invite people who just ask too many questions or don't know about to think that the glasses are full, and that there's no limit as to what you can undertake, and that everything is possible. And even if it's not possible, and even if it's a failure, well, you learn from your failure and you rebound from that. So I'm kind of quoting, like, happiness is not a destination. It's a succession of moments. Life is a succession of moments with the good and the bad. And that's what creates a journey at the end. Don't wait to reach the end of the journey to decide whether it was a good one or a bad one, and to see how much money you have in your bank account or whatever. Happiness is an act. It's a journey that you want to enjoy at every single moment. Gandhi was saying, live as if you're going to die tomorrow. And that's it. That's the philosophy.
And I know your love for philosophy definitely comes across the book as well, and it was these sort of quotes and things you have in there, which was great. I really enjoy that, and the part which I love one of the parallels which I was thinking of reading it as, obviously the book you read Mark's book, and that really obviously got you inspired to wanted to work for him, wanted to work in the company there, and then for 30 years you were what I would call an intrapreneur, right? An entrepreneur within a business itself, helping to continuously build, create new things, opening offices, starting new parts of the business. I had that same moment with a book from Anthony Robbins, which is called Unleash the Power Within. But my journey then ended up being an entrepreneur, right? So I was doing these things on my own in a sense, which is, not that different sometimes. It just means, the risk levels, I guess, are a little different when you're playing with your own money. But it's so we've both been having an amazing journey here, and as I said, crisscrossing each other at certain times there. And it was amazing to hear a little more detail of it, especially after having read the book now, of course, hearing a little more around it of what you were shared here. So, Michel, thank you for your time here. I really enjoyed it. And I have no doubt others will enjoy our conversation. And then I'm sure we'll enjoy reading your book as well.
Thank you very much, Marcus. I really appreciate it. As you know, I haven't given too many interviews in the past. I don't like to push myself too much, but I thought on this occasion I'll make a bit of an exception. And this is not a dress rehearsal, which is the title of the book, is what has driven this exchange. But I want to say thank you very much. Beyond this, I really enjoy our exchange of views and a little bit of trip of memory lane. It's quite a good fun. So thank you for this opportunity.
Absolutely. It always is. Thank you. We'll talk soon.
Cheers.
The Sports Entrepreneurs by Marcus Luer podcasts are a collection of interviews and stories. All content in this podcast is the copyright of Marcus Lure. Reproduction and distribution of the presentation without written permission of the owner is prohibited. All rights reserved.